or YouTube, or they can write back in the future. But I found that more people participate when they're able to watch the live stream than ever before. Kathy and I had 3 public hearings yesterday.
Really?
In Rensselaer County at 9 a.m., at 12 p.m., and at 5 p.m. And we had over 100 people every time jumping in on these 20-minute public hearings. Whereas there's no way, when we did it 3 years ago, we had
Ben, we're ready to go, I think. All right, everyone's ready. Thank you, everyone, for being here November the 18th for our town and village consolidation informational meeting. Ben from Laberge, thank you for being here. And everyone following along on YouTube, Zoom, and Facebook Live, thank you for being here. Could we please stand and just do a quick Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, God, liberty, and justice for all. Thank you all, and thank you everybody for working very hard on getting this meeting together and getting all this information that we can get out to the residents so everybody can be informed and make an informed decision come election day on November 30th. So with that, Ben, thank you very much for being here. We got our entire town board here in town hall, and Jessica from my office working on the computer over there. So Ben, the floor is yours, and we look forward to a great presentation.
Well, thank you. I want to introduce Kathy Rooney. She's on the screen with us as well. She's a local government specialist. And if you recall, the former county manager in Schenectady County, and she's one of our chief architects of this plan. So she's going to be giving half the presentation. And at some point, John Rodat will be coming in. Jess, if you see his name in the waiting room, he's also part of our team. He's our numbers guy and our data guy. So I'm going. You need to make it so that I can share my screen, please. We'll wait for Jess to do that so I can share the screen and run the PowerPoint presentation.
And Ben, can we just make sure the whole, I see the whole village board up on the screen. Can they all hear us loud and clear?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here, the mayor and all the village trustees as well.
Thanks for doing this.
I thank you all for being here. It's an amazing process we've gone through these last 8 weeks. Let me get up here. Can you all see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
I hope so, or else you're only going to hear me talk for a long time. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I apologize a little bit about the length of the PowerPoint. Kathy, John, Lucy, and myself, we spent a lot of time in the last few days creating a PowerPoint presentation that would answer as many questions as possible. We were getting some questions throughout the day. So we're going to incorporate some of those questions into our answers as we move forward. So I do want to thank the town and the village. You were both on this, you're all on this meeting today, but more, you've been part of this process for the last 8 weeks. This is not something you all asked for. This is something that was foisted upon yourself. And it's hard to do. It's hard to do in a crisis time. COVID alone added additional complications. But I want to take a moment to thank you for what you do every day on behalf of the residents of both the village and town. It's often that local officials become a punching bag for the public when times are tough. You guys have done a great job both in the past and during this process. And it's something that you should all be proud of your efforts, and the town and village residents should recognize that. But not just the town board members, the village board members, but also Kathy, our town clerk, Jennifer, our village clerk, and all the town and village department heads. Everyone took time out of their days, whether it was in the morning before 7 o'clock, sometimes 7:30, whether it was later on in the evening at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. And you all participated in this process. It was open dialogue. It was information gathering. It was information giving. There were a lot of questions that were not able to be answered right away, and a lot of concern on behalf of all the different department heads. But together you came in and you helped produce a report that gives everyone in the public as much information as possible prior to their vote.
Ben, can I just say something?
Sure.
You forgot me.
No, I said all trustees.
Yeah, but my name's not listed there.
Well, I mean, Go back up. It'll be live, fixed now. This is going to be a true test of how bad I actually type.
Well, you spelled it right, so that's great.
There we go.
Thank you.
I apologize. I'm looking right at you and you're saying that I forgot you. I said, I see you right here. I've spoken to you a lot. Actually, you know, I just got a text from Kathleen telling me the same thing. So we're all here.
For fixing.
My team is, I'm Ben Sutton, the Vice President of Laberge Group. I mentioned Kathy already. John Rodat, who is not on this right now, or he may be coming soon. He's the President of Public Signals. He's been working with us for about a decade now on shared service, consolidation, dissolution, and running numbers for us. So this meeting that we're having today is not a public hearing. It is a public information meeting. It's not required to have, but it's important to have. So we're going to answer as many questions as we can, but because of COVID, because of the increase of the incidences around the state, we moved it from an in-person meeting and took the risk away and put this online. So we're going to ask you all to have questions or comments, to hold them to the end, and then enter them into Facebook Live, where Jessica or somebody who has Facebook open can ask the questions and we can be as responsive as we can. For those of you that have already submitted questions to the town or the village, again, we're going to try to answer those as we're doing the presentation. So during the last few weeks, it came to mind that a number of the residents, both the village and town, still don't know how we got here or why we're having a vote in a week and a half or what this all means. So our presentation is going to start with how did we get here? As a recap, we're going to discuss consolidation. What does it mean? An overview of the process. Then we're going to go into the methodology for how we developed the actual report, the interim study that has been made available on the town and the village website, on our website, and a variety of different platforms all over Facebook. Then we're going to talk about the study findings. We're going to discuss a potential post-consolidation condition. It's not the only potential post-consolidation, but we're going to talk about it. And we're going to use that discussion to frame a potential cost and taxation implication, and then talk about the next steps. And then we'll answer any questions people have. It is rather a long presentation, so if we do need a intermission, raise your hand, folks, and we'll take a 5-minute intermission if you need to. So how did we get here? We mentioned this before, but in 2010, the Government Reorganization and Citizen Empowerment Act was passed, and it provided an easier opportunity for the concept of dissolution or consolidation of local governments to occur. It increased the opportunity for petitions to be submitted, and it made it easier for the citizens to initiate a process. In this case, in the town and village of Pawling, it's a citizen-initiated process because there's two ways you can do it. One way is the village board and the town board each individually pass a resolution starting the process of the consolidation, or we do a citizen-initiated process where 10% of the electors of each of the village and town sign a petition requesting to move forward. And that's what we did, a citizen-initiated, otherwise known as a voter-initiated process. On August 10th, the village and town clerks reviewed and certified the petitions. They received the petitions, they certified them. September 1st and 2nd, village and town boards enacted resolutions calling for the referendum. If you recall, the referendum had to be no less than 60 days and no more than 90 days. So we had the referendum on November 30th. And a reminder to everyone that that's all the village and town board technically had to do. They could have just said, hey, go figure this out yourself, go vote without information, we'll see you in the fall. But instead, they recognize that this is a very, very important issue. Probably the most important decision you all make this year is what is the future of the village and town? This has huge implications on governance in both the village and town government, and has implications on the services provided, the governance provided, and the future planning and land use provided. So they felt that it was important to develop this interim study of consolidation and do this prior to the referendum so that people had an opportunity to review unbiased, objective information and go to the polls on November 30th to make their decision or their vote. And as we mentioned before, as you know, the vote is going to be November 30th. Town of Pawling is following town law. It's 12 to 7. And it's going to be at the Lathrop Auditorium, and the village is going to be 12 to 9 at Village Hall. And the question is going to appear on the ballot, is shall the village of Pawling be consolidated with the town of Pawling? This is what's in the state statute. This is the only question that's going to be there. It is not shall the village of Pawling, town of Pawling do a study. and come back to us later on. It's, shall we consolidate? So you're asking the public, should we consolidate our governments, yes or no? That's the only question that's going to be on the ballot November 30th. If the vote is no in either the town or the village, consolidation stops. The process stops. No further action occurs besides certifying the election. It cannot happen again for 4 years. The board cannot initiate it. The public cannot initiate it. And then you can focus on additional shared services collectively with other towns or with the county to continue what you've been doing so far. And I want to take a moment to give you all kudos, because the village and town are not separate entities on every single part of government. You guys have been working together for years. There's a lot of services you all have been doing, and the report illustrates what those are, both townwide with recreation and assessment, with your fire protection district, the village and town on water and sewer. You work well with your highway departments. You guys are well run individually and collectively, and I think your residents should be proud of the efforts you all put in. However, if the vote is yes in both the town and the village, now you have to continue the process as laid out in the law. And that means you have to meet within 30 days to create a formal committee and set your schedule. You have to approve a consolidation plan in 180 days or less. Now, I really should put an asterisk on that, because you'll hear this often throughout the next 45 minutes to an hour. You're the first to ever do this. So there are going to be complications. So there may potentially be litigation. There may be lawsuits that are going to delay your process. There may be a process at the end of the 180 days where you all can't agree. That's going to extend your 180 days. We don't know how long that'll be. You may end up having a mediator involved in the process. You may then have to have that mediator get the report back to you guys and keep working. So that 180 days or less, it's set in law, but it's not set in stone. After you accept that plan, if we're using the 180 days or even more, you have to have a public hearing within 35 days to 90 days after. Then you have 60 days after that to finalize and adopt the plan. After that, the plan is subject to permissive referendum, meaning that should the public not like the plan or want to vote the process down, you need 25% of the electorate to sign the petition to have another vote. It is not a guaranteed second vote. So a lot of the things I'm going to be saying today is to set the record straight. There's a lot of disinformation, misinformation, angles, and individual narratives that have been portrayed throughout the area, whether it's in the press, whether it's on social media. We're going to be factual. It's a final consolidation plan. It's subject to permissive referendum. If you do not get 25% of the village and the town to sign petitions, you're consolidating on the day that it says in the plan. There is no second vote. I want to repeat that. There's no guaranteed second vote. And on our website, on the town's website, in the plan, you see what this all means on the little timeline, but this is a recap of what I just said. I want to highlight the bottom right-hand side. If you did have a second vote and it fails, there's no reorganization. If it passes, there is a reorganization. So the two issues here is if you have a final plan, if there's no petition, you consolidate. If you have a vote, a second vote based on permissive referendum, based on that petition, it'll pass or it'll fail. If it fails, no reorganization, it goes back to the original, it cannot be brought up again for 4 years. So we developed an interim plan of study, a interim study of consolidation. And it's important to note that, again, you didn't have to do it, but it's important to allow people to have as much information as possible to participate in the process and learn about it. But this was not a 10,000-foot study. This wasn't a little overview of what the village does, what the town does. This was not a kumbaya to figure it out and give a little brochure. This was a very in-depth study. And I want the record to reflect that this was not an easy study. It was an in-depth study that had a lot of data inputs. We as a team had to review all the existing reports and data sets that were available, your budgets, your revenues, your expenditures, your outstanding encumbrances, looking at your bond, understand how your commissions work on the sewer commission, how your water districts work, how your fire district works, understand what each of your departments do. We interviewed elected officials and department heads and committee members. We spoke to planning board members and zoning board members. We summarized how you do your jobs. We didn't do an audit of your job. We summarized the current operations and organization and workload of all the village departments and the town departments. It's important to point out that you guys are lean right now. Each of the communities, the village and the town, you've been underneath this 2% property tax cap for almost a decade now. There is not a lot of fat. There's almost no fat. You've already cut down to the bare bones. Your cup is full of water, so to speak. Neither of you can just simply do what everyone else did with no additional help. You need help. If you're going to consolidate, you're going to have to merge the staff together and use all of your resources because you're already doing a fantastic job. In our report, we inventoried your equipment, your assets and liabilities. We determined or looked at staffing of what a new consolidated governance would look like and the staff you need to do. Their costs required to perform those services. We scaled up that cost because of the union contracts in the town versus the village. We looked at what kind of staffing will we need to continue the services in this new consolidated government. We summarized the municipal laws in both. We did not do an exhaustive review of each law because that happens in consolidation plan, but we summarized the laws. And then we enumerated the current shared services that you have today, the village and the town and the county, and showcase some of your efficiencies. Well, then we had to look at what a potential post-consolidation condition is. And that's a mouthful. I understand that. But it is a potential. It's not just the post-consolidation. In the consolidation report, in the full one, the village and town would have to agree on that post-consolidation. So we call it the potential post-consolidation condition. In this, we investigated opportunities for cost savings and or improved service delivery. We looked at if you had a consolidated government, what could it look like? What opportunities could you have to reorganize and streamline and become more effective or efficient? And understanding that you have double the workload to do now in this consolidated government that before you had separated and divided. Not duplicative, but divided. And that's important to say. Many people throw out the word duplication, duplicative. We have 2 clerks, we have 2 boards, we have 2 inspectors, we have 2 highway departments. The only thing duplicative in that is the name, is the title clerk or highway or operator or planning board, because what you really have is a division of labor between the village and the town. You both have similar titles, but very different duties. It's not as if the town clerk can absorb everything the village clerk can do, or the village treasurer can do everything the town bookkeeper does, or either the personnel in the highway department can simply just take everybody on and do all the work. You have a division of labor that's clear. You're sharing and you're working together. So it's a pretty neat process that you have. But in the potential post-consolidation impact of the governance for a consolidated government, we talk about the potential form of local government and what that means for representation for the town and the village residents. We talk about the provision of services, how that would function, regardless of the form of the government representation, how would the services be provided, and what are those potential cost and taxation implications. And that's really going to be the 3 areas how we've framed this entire presentation. So let's start with the findings of the form of local government representation. And by the way, to both boards, tomorrow morning I will be emailing you, or Kathy will email you, a PDF of this presentation to put on your individual websites. It'll be on our website, and you can post it. So those people that are viewing from home, if they're having a hard time reading this, or they want to look at it again, they'll have the entire presentation. And Lori, the one they'll have will have your name on it too, because I just changed it. So the study findings, where did we start with this process? We started this process with General Municipal Law 17A. And I've said this before, and I wish I could coin it and trademark it, but the law is flawed. I've had a lot of fun saying that the last 8 weeks. It's a really poorly written law. And unfortunately, The law focuses on dissolution and consolidation. And while dissolution has occurred since the law was created, you're the first village town consolidation in the state. And there are a lot of problems with the law and with implementation of what the law's intent is, understanding what the intent is. There's no case law or clarity. There are a lot of questions that have to be answered either through a declaratory judgment or going back to the state law and legislators and have them fix the law. So we've done our best working on this process to answer the questions you may have. But when you start with the process, there's a definition of consolidation. And we mentioned this before in the September meeting and the August meeting, but the definition of consolidation pursuant to the law, it says it's either the combination of two or more local government entities resulting in the termination of both and the creation of a new. Or it's B, the combination of two or more local government entities resulting in the termination of one and merging them or resorbing into the resulting entity. And the challenge with this is a village cannot exist outside of a town. There's no such thing in New York State as an unincorporated town. So it's either, as the law says, the village and town consolidating and what's left is a town government, or there exists a interpretation that potentially, if a judge gets involved, that you may be able to create a coterminous village town underneath this law, and whereby you still have a town government, because again, a village cannot live outside of a town, but now the boundaries match and you can choose to run it as a village. That's an interpretation. It's not supported by a Department of State. They issued a informal opinion that says that coterminous does not comply with Article 17A for consolidation, does not meet the definition of consolidation because you still have a village and a town incorporation, but there still exists the interpretation which lends itself to potential lawsuits and somebody with a black robe on deciding whether or not that can occur. So when we developed the plan, we identified that there are these potentials. And that's why you'll see in the plan and throughout our discussion on governance what that means. But I want to read out to you the informal opinion. This is not formal. It is not their law. Their memorandum states that a coterminous village is a unique form of a local government organization. Geographically, a coterminous village and town share the same boundaries. I'm saying this because a lot of people don't understand what coterminous means. So depending on how the coterminous unit is formed, the town and village function together as a single local government or as two separate local governments. So according to Department of State's LG 06, when they discuss what a coterminous village town is, it's the village and town boundaries are matched. The village annexes into the town. You have a village and town share a boundary, but the public would have to decide whether it be run as a village or run as a town. And they're two different chief elected official and legislative board structures. In a village, the mayor is the chief elected official and appoints with confirmation of the village board, is running the day-to-day. And in a town government, the chief elected official is the town supervisor, but he's a chairman of a board, not the same powers. In a village, the clerk and highway department are appointed. In a town, they're elected. So if you went coterminous, you have to discuss how to move forward. But I want to highlight, going back one slide, because of the non-clarifying language, because the law is flawed, we requested that informal opinion of the Department of State, and they say that you cannot go coterminous underneath this, so that'll be yet to be determined in a court of law. But what does this all mean? Well, regardless of whether or not it's a village or a town coterminous, today you have a village, government, and a boundary, and that's highlighted by the light blue. And you have a town which surrounds that village. The village is wholly contained in the town. In a consolidated government, you'll no longer have that village boundary in the middle. It's all one government. It's all one township, a boundary. And so it's one board that's elected by everybody. So when you're elected by everybody, the village of Pawling loses its direct representation of issues that are solely to the area formerly known as that boundary. So I want to be clear. I'm going to highlight that again. Right now, you have a government, a village board, you have planning boards and zoning boards and committees where your sole responsibility are issues in that light blue. Through consolidation, you lose that direct representation. Now, you still have representation with an elected government. That's the entire boundary, but not solely on those issues. And your representation also changes on the boards, the planning boards and the zoning boards and the like. So when we went through the potential efficiencies and cost savings through consolidation, we really went through each department, what you did, what your budgets were, and what you would need to keep, what you would need to be able to staff a consolidated government. You would still need your inspectors. You would still need your court clerks and your sewer commission staff and your planning staff. And what was initially looked at as, hey, we have a lot of duplicative government. Investigations show that you do not have a lot of current service overlap. And in fact, there's limited or minimal fiscal impact. When we did the analysis and we looked at the staffing and we raised up the staffing for the highway department to the highway department unit cost of the town, which regardless of whether it's a village as a coterminus or a town, you're going to have that union contract. When you look at the cost of services, when you bring in the central services, when you bring in the staff for the building inspectors, and you bring in your central administration, and when you recognize that you are going from 4 volunteer boards to 2 volunteer boards, or I think a town planning board and zoning board get paid, but they get paid very little. But you have 4 boards going down to 2, you have a huge need for additional planning. So in our analysis, we added the position of a town planner to assist in all this. Because when we spoke to the planning boards and the zoning boards, it was a big question is, how will all this be done? You know, when we look at the interim report, we have to look at how will government still be run? It's not simply a numbers game. That's easy. Anybody can go ahead and look at budgets and sit in front of a computer and figure out what a new budget's going to be. Take from here, go to there, figure this out. Oh, they're duplicated, get rid of, and cut. But the reality is your planning boards, both at the village level and the town level, do a heck of a lot of work. You each have 2 meetings a month. Your zoning board is a heck of a lot of work. Your planning secretaries are inundated. Your inspectors are inundated. So we added a town planner to assist in this situation. Because not only do you have the day-to-day work of today, you also have to deal with combining your comprehensive plan. I mean, the village spent a couple $100,000 years ago to do a brand new comprehensive plan with one of the nation's leading urban planners, Dewani. Town has a comprehensive plan. Each have zoning ordinances. They're not the same. They have to be worked on together to fill in the hole, so to speak. There's a lot of work to be done. You need a town planner. Recognize now we added that in. When you take all the numbers, how the budgets went up, you first saved, then you went up. You reduced the cost of the elected officials, but you added in the town planner. You ended with a minimal savings of $52,616, so 53 grand. That's it. On over $5.3 million, you have less than $53,000 of actual cost savings at the combined consolidated government level. Regardless of the final model of governance, we had a small little committee. We asked at the beginning of this to have 2 village board members and 2 town board members work with us to get a good understanding of how you work and cooperatively and collaboratively think about ways that we can maintain the services that are being provided by the town and the village. You know, it was important to the committee and important to all the elected officials and the department heads that we develop a study that makes sure that should this go forward, that the village residents would continue to have the services that they have today, and the town residents would continue to have the services they have today. So what that means, though, is if you are in a consolidated government, only the people that are benefited by those services should pay for those services. So street lighting and sidewalk maintenance, water and sewer would be districts. And that's up to the street lighting and sidewalk maintenance would be up to the final consolidated plan in the committee. They may choose at some point to say no, that everyone benefits, in which case there wouldn't be a district, or they may do what the majority of other communities have done when this occurs in dissolution, is create that district. I'm not going to tell you which way to go. I'm giving you both options. But water and sewer will absolutely be a district because you cannot charge a tax on people not benefiting. Then we come down to the two additional issues, police and refuse collection. There is no village police department. People sometimes think there is. You have the county sheriff, and the village has a contract with the county sheriff for what we call enhanced police presence. Here's one of the flaws in the law. If you dissolve in a dissolution or consolidate here, and you now have one new government, there's no ability as of right in Article 12 of town law to create a police district. There's no as of right ability for a part-town police. So should the Consolidation Committee choose to make this town-wide, well, then everyone would have some semblance of additional police coverage. Should the Consolidation Committee choose to keep police service the way it is, servicing the area of the village, that would require special legislation at the State Assembly and State Senate. So we highlight that in the report and let you know what that means. And then refuse collection. Right now, the village has a very low rate of refuse collection. The DPW collects it and brings it over for disposal. And in our reports in consolidation dissolution, we recommend a refuse collection district so that will go out to bid and the village residents will still have their curbside collection. And there are three options they can use. This new consolidated government and this new consolidation committee, they can choose to do a town-wide district, but that won't be cost effective given that the town has such large properties and land in between houses. They can choose to say, we're not going to do it at all. The consolidated committee can say, we're not going to do it at all. Or they're going to say that we're going to have a refuse collection to keep the service available for the village residents. So that's what we put in the plan. Our plan calls for a refuse collection district, although it'll be significantly higher that fee. Right now, your fee was $219. I heard it goes up to $225. In our plan, when we contacted the refuse collection companies and we figured out how much it would cost, and we did the median, it's $355 a year, which is an increase about $135, $136. So that's an additional fee to the area formerly known as the village. So I mentioned earlier about law enforcement, but again, I have to highlight this point that while you can create, the new government can create water and sewer and lighting and sidewalk as of right underneath town law and village law, the new consolidated government has no direct authority to create that police district. So you're at risk of losing your police or your enhanced police coverage. And on the refuse, again, I went over the three different options, but I want to highlight the fact that right now, village DPW does this. That doesn't mean it's going to happen in a consolidated government. And we made a plan that it didn't happen, that you'd have a district that would go out to bid. You have a consolidated DPW and highway department that's going to be doing other things in this new consolidated government. But there is an impact on planning and zoning. I mentioned a little earlier, but you have a very complex situation. This is a town that has zoning and a village that has zoning. So what do you do with this? And then they're competing ideals, they're competing visions. Town zoning is not set up for an urban densification as the village is, and the village code is not set up for the suburban structure, rural structure, agrarian structure that the town is. So to preserve both distinct land use policies, we have to figure out a way at some point during the consolidation process and then during the 2-year transition phase to how to bring these together. And it's not simply take a donut hole of the village and drop their code in. There needs to be congruency. There needs to be collaboration amongst those municipal boundaries, a movement between the village and the town that doesn't currently exist in code. And it's not simply putting it in because you each have the same letters, residential, R1. You have to create maybe a hamlet one. So there's a lot of work that has to get done, and there's a lot of education that has to get done on the planning board level. So with planning boards, what happens with the planning board? You have 2 planning boards. How do we make sure that both the village and the town are represented on this board? We call for it in the plan where we say that it's 4 members of the town outside the village and 3 members of the village planning board to make a 7-person board. But the plan, even a consolidated plan, is not a law. So there's no guarantee that that's going to occur. So we recommended that village and town council look at municipal home rule. And if there's a way that they can put that into the law of this new consolidated government, what this would be. And there's precedent for that. Across our state, we have joint planning boards and joint zoning boards that are a village and a town where they codify in law the residency requirements of that board to require there to be this kind of a mix. So I'm not a counsel, I'm not an attorney, but we would recommend that the attorneys for both communities work on a consolidated home rule law to put that into place to ensure that there's representation. But again, there's right now where it's our ideal, it's our plan for it. The consolidated plan would have to agree on it and would have to put in law. But the concept is to establish a membership that has both, because it's recognized that the current town planning board doesn't have the expertise and knowledge of the village, and the village planning board doesn't have the same expertise and knowledge of the town, but combined, you would be able to address these issues. But it is complex. It is doubling of the work, which again is why we put in the budget municipal planner position. And that's reflective in our chart later on as to the fiscal impact of the shift of staffing. In highway services, it's not simply, I have a highway department, you have a highway department, together we have a highway department. There are different sizes, there are different trucks, there's different sand mixtures. There's the village during the winter removes the snow when towns plow the snow. We've interviewed now over 110 different highway departments in New York State, from villages to towns to counties to state. It's easy for people to find that press release or find that sound bite they want to use to say that we have too much government. We have 2, 3, 4, 5 different people doing things on the same roads, but they don't realize that there's already ownership issues. There's already contracts with states and counties and towns for plowing. They work together already. So in your situation, you have a division of labor on winter maintenance and summer maintenance. You share equipment already. If you were to consolidate, we recommend that we identify additional opportunities to increase efficiencies on equipment, on snowplow routes. We even looked at, you don't need to have 2 heads. You can, meaning you have right now a head of a highway department in the town and one at the village. You may want to make one reclassified as a water and sewer superintendent. So now you have somebody directly in charge of the day-to-day water and sewer operations. But you do have opportunities in the highway departments. We also noted in the plan that there are potential impacts on central administrative services and legal services. Now you both have a central administration and a fiscal office and legal services, but they're not the same. What the village clerk does and the town clerk does are completely different. What your treasurer in the village does and the bookkeeper and the receiver of taxes are different. So there may be a little bit of overlapping functions that will be streamlined in a consolidated government, but you still need the people to do the work. So the recurring savings are marginal and are very, very small. We do feel that through attrition over the implementation, 3 to 5 years after it's implemented, you may be able to save 1.5 people somewhere in these 8.5 people and the 23 people the town has. And that's where we come up with our cost savings number of almost $53,000. But the other services that you have already that are town-wide are also important to note and say that they're still going to exist no matter what form of government you have in a consolidated government. So your new consolidated government will still do coordinated and shared park recreation, ambulance and golf course, your amazing youth and senior programming that you have right now would continue. Your transfer station would still continue. Your assessor, nothing would change there, and your dog control wouldn't change. It's important to note, for those of you that are watching this online, on YouTube or on Facebook Live, I urge you and implore you to download the plan. Go to the existing services and see how much they're working on together. Now, shared services is not a new concept. It is not a new objective or agenda item for these two communities. You have been coordinating, communicating, collaborating, and you'll continue doing so going forward. There are great opportunities to continue shared services, but there's not a lot of savings outside of a perceived tax credit, which may or may not come, and we'll talk about that later. So in the potential restructuring, we do make a few different recommendations. We did recommend, and I mentioned already in water and wastewater, the potential shifting of a highway management personnel into a water and wastewater superintendent, potentially even getting the certifications that you need to plants. Something you can do now, but something you can also do later. We mentioned already your municipal planner, be it a town planner or a village planner, but we also recommend that you consider an administrative position. If you do go forward in consolidation, this is a very complex process. This is not a dissolution. This is not a situation where in a village dissolution, you can literally turn the lights off, leave the keys on the table, lock the door on the way out and say goodbye. This is a consolidation where everything has to get rewritten. All the laws have to get rewritten. All the ordinances have to be rewritten. All the procedures and policies and human resource issues have to occur while you're still running the government day to day. So we recommend that you all, if this does go forward, consider reorganizing a central administration and create the position of a town or a village administrator, or for a long-term, a consolidated government administrator position that can run the government day to day and work through this consolidation as you go into this new form of government, this uncharted territory and waters. So that's what we mentioned already. But also you have an opportunity, and a unique opportunity, if you do go forward in this process, to look at what this government could look like, what the form of government's going to be, and the elected positions you have right now. If you go coterminous, you don't need to have an elected clerk. You have an appointed clerk. If you go as a town, as the Article 17 says, you also have the opportunity here in this new reorganization to determine whether or not the positions of town clerk, receiver, taxes, and highway superintendents will stay as elected, or if they can be appointed. That's up to you guys. You're building a new government. It's a unique way, a new opportunity, or at least a discussion point to have as you go forward. Do we have to have everything elected, or can I, for example, the receiver of taxes, can that be an appointed position rolled into my bookkeeper or treasury division? My highway superintendent, should that have a job description, or should it have an engineering background, do the new workload that it has? Just want to point out, 93% of our towns have an elected highway superintendent. So I'm not sitting here advocating for the removal of an elected and moving to an appointed. I'm just sharing the information that it gives you the opportunity to do so. It's not Ben Side and Laberge saying get rid of electeds. It's Laberge Group saying you have an opportunity. It's part of the process. So then we go to our findings, the third part of this. We've already spoken about governance, and I mentioned before, regardless of the form of government you take, and it was mentioned by many people before, your level of representation, your level of impact as village residents will be diminished, because now you're going to be one small part of a larger electorate. Whatever government form you call yourselves, consolidated government, town government, village, coterminous, you're still the 25% of the electorate. So you will have a diminished role and representation. I wanted to share that in this process, and you have to keep that in mind as you go through your fiscal implications. So what's not mentioned often, and what's forgotten by proponents of dissolution and consolidation, is the amount of work that has to occur prior to that. The amount of work your town clerk, and by the way, I have to give props to Kathy and Jen. You guys did not ask for this process, and you guys each worked on nights and weekends. You're running a special election because this didn't happen early enough. I mean, if you were served the petition 2 weeks earlier, you wouldn't have had to do all this extra work. So hats off to you guys. There's a lot of work you've done to get to this. The extra legal notices, the extra referendum notices, putting together these meetings, getting an election pulled together, the absentee ballots pulled together, the location, and then ultimately the counting, certifying, canvassing of the vote. You are elected officials, but there's a lot of work you did, and I want to give you I'd say my hat's off, but my hair's off, my hat's off. Good job to both of you guys. It's a lot of work you did in that. But going forward is where the hard work happens. I thank everyone for the work they've done so far, but should this vote go forward, there's a lot of fiscal impacts that are going to have to be analyzed. And prior to even implementation, you have to understand what we're doing. So there's pre-consolidation and then transition costs. And we're going to go over what those unanticipated and anticipated costs are. So prior to even getting to that final, after you get the plan, prior to you consolidating, there's a lot of work that's going to occur on the back of your taxpayers that was not accounted for. So our fiscal impacts, as we're developing this condition, as we're going through our fiscal study, when I turn over to Kathy and look at the numbers, there's a number of 6 different things we want to go over. One is the pre-consolidation and transition costs. And this is important because nobody talks about this. 2 is, what is the potential post-consolidation savings? We mentioned 53,000, but Kathy will go through how that occurred. How do we come to that number? Our services and staffing levels, we'll go over that. Our cost shift, because it's not a savings. There's all over Facebook, all over the press, there's a false narrative, an alternative narrative, only focusing on a number of 29% of a tax cut. But they fail to show that it's not a cut as a shift to somebody else to pay for it. So we're going to go over what that cost shift is. Yes, the village tax rate goes down, but the town tax rate goes up. So you're shifting it to your neighbors and saying, you go pay for it now. So you're only saving 53 grand, 1%, but now everyone else is paying for it. So we're going to go over what that means and explain that to everyone online. And then we're going to talk about the creation of special districts, and finally, this tax credit. Number 1 is the pre-consolidation and transition costs. By the way, again, if you need an intermission, anyone's got to get up, move around, it's fine. I know I've already been going for 45 minutes. I apologize. But the pre-consolidation and transition costs are costly. This is a complex issue. Many of these costs, if not most of the costs, will be incurred prior to consolidation. And the plan process is going to be marred by legal issues and legal ambiguities in the law. I mean, you have a lawsuit right now and you haven't even started the process. You're incurring fees to determine whether or not we even have a vote in 2 weeks. And you follow the state law. There's nothing in state law that prohibits frivolous lawsuits. There's nothing in state law that says, hey, you really have to have standing to file. So you're incurring costs already before you begin. So we used our professional experience and we developed a rough estimate of the cost of plan development and the implementation. And it's in the range of $365,000 to $585,000. And it was brought to my attention by one of my questions that came in email today, that why is it so high? And we'll go over that because dissolution plans don't put that in their plan. Well, we have a unique situation here at Laberge. Not only have we developed plans for dissolution, we've implemented those. We've implemented district consolidations in town of Brookhaven and Skodak. We've done about a half a dozen actual implementations of dissolution, and the costs are way above what you ever think of in developing those dissolution plans. The legal shenanigans, the additional pieces. There was one issue in the village of Salem when they dissolved the town of Salem. The town thought they're getting Village Hall. Village dissolves, all assets become those of the town. They designed the new town hall there. They got a grant for the town hall. They're going to convert Prowfit Hall, which is the fire department, to a new town hall. Then they realized the village actually didn't even own that building. They spent a year of legal fees trying to go through probate court to get Village Hall transferred to town. There are fees no one ever thinks about in developing these projects. So the consolidation plan itself is going to range anywhere from $105,000 to $180,000, depending on the legal issues, how well the village and town committee can come together. Should there be required to have a mediator? Do we have to go to a mediator and come back and go back to mediator and come back? So we gave you a range of about $105,000 to $180,000, including legal fees for the development of the plan, but not legal fees to fight in court. And then plan implementation. And these are about $250,000 to $400,000. I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things that have to occur, and I'm not going to read every bullet to you. But we mentioned the zoning, and we also have to go over restructuring current bonds and financial agreements. What bonds will stay the purview of the village and those of the town, what's going to move to the consolidated government, what laws have to be changed and merged into a code, how do I do that code, and then we have to codify that code, how to get that online, coordinating all the employment and human resource activities of the transfer of all of the staff of the village and town to a new consolidated government. What are the union issues? What are the civil service issues? What are the retirement issues and pension issues and healthcare issues? There's a lot of work that has to occur in those. The easy part is simply the development of the map plan and reports. Those are easy. That's an engineer who comes in, does a map plan and report, you form a district, you're done. That's easy for water and sewer because it exists. Lighting and sidewalk, they have to get done as well. The police is not so easy. And fire is not so easy because on fire, you have to, as a group, decide whether it's going to be a fire protection district or a fire district. If it's a fire district, it has to be done so that you have a board of commissioners. If it's a fire protection district, the new consolidated government, if it's operated as a town, would have to reconstitute. So there's a lot of different pieces to this that are timely, and time is costly. But there's also the work of the new government. The purchasing of software and licenses to be on the same platforms, the training of staff and planning board and zoning board, developing a building feasibility assessment as to how do I do this? Where do I put everyone? Where do we grow? What do I get rid of? What building codes we need? Is the village hall and town hall needed? Are the village DPW and the town highway buildings needed? Are they going to still be done separately? If they're contaminated sites, how do I clean it up? How do I get it on the tax roll? A lot of things have to occur during this. If you're going to unify your highway department to a unified facility, you have to do an engineering report to expand that. There's appraisals that have to occur if you're going to be selling any municipal buildings. You can't give them away. Village records have to be digitized to be brought up the same as the town records because town's already going through that today. So in whatever consolidated government you have, you want to be in the same platform. And then there's the unanticipated costs of the legal shenanigans that are going to occur during a process of people Article 78ing throughout an entire process. And that's because the law is flawed. So there are unanticipated costs. We can't tell you how much litigation is going to be. We can't tell you how much mediation is going to be. I'd like to be able to say that the village and town are going to come together, snap their fingers, see a crystal ball, and have everything solved in 3 meetings and be done. But the reality is the framers of the law recognize that that's not the way government really works. That village and towns have different viewpoints, and they've got to come together and work this out. But it does give, there does have a built-in process that if you can't come to an agreement, you can get a mediator, a court-appointed mediator, either yourselves go to the court or 5 people that sign the petition can file Article 78 and force a mediation. So all these things occur. It's not a short-term, 180 days, snap your fingers and be done. And I want to remind you, at the time of the meeting, a lawsuit's already been filed. And this, we don't know how much that's going to cost. And you're paying for this. The taxpayers of the village and town are already paying for this, which is a challenge unto itself. So I'm going to turn it over now to Kathy, and she's going to talk about the potential post-consolidation impacts, go through our charts, and explain how we get to everything. Kathy?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. So as Ben just indicated, Ben talked about the costs pre-consolidation and during the transition. What I'm going to focus on now is what are the factors that we looked at that would impact what could be the potential impact on tax rates and what each resident or taxpayer would pay in a post-consolidation scenario. So Ben talked quite a bit about the cost savings potential cost savings that we identified through the process. And I really can't overstate what we found and what Ben had already said, that you run very efficient operations now. And there are some small opportunities for economies of scale and for efficiencies and streamlining, and we've identified those. But again, the overlying theme that we found was there's a lot of shared services going on, and probably as significant of that is that there's a really obvious division of labor between the town and village. Functions that the town delivers and spends staff time and contract services on are in a large way very different than what the village does. So when you look to merge the pots and areas that you can really find some significant duplication and cost savings, we found to be limited. What I also want to talk about in this section, and it's probably it's much more significant in terms of what it does to what village taxpayers will pay and what residents who live outside the village will pay as a result of the consolidation. When you take multiple tax levies that are on different buckets or of tax base, and you put them into one pot, things begin to shift. And we want to walk through that and hopefully try to make as simple as we can a somewhat complicated process around rates. And then the final piece we want to talk about is the potential citizen empowerment tax credit. And as you know, New York State initiated this tax credit to incentivize communities to consolidate. And essentially, communities that choose to consolidate will get a incentive, an annual incentive over time each year, equal to 15% of the levy of the two municipalities prior to consolidation. So in the instance of the village and town experience, your combined levies right now are approximately $5.3 million. So you would get a 15% tax credit each year relative to that. The major note we'd like to point out is that this is subject to annual New York State appropriations. And what we have identified in the current state fiscal year is that the communities that have been already determined eligible are receiving 80% of the credit, not the 100%.
And that's an important thing to note, Kathleen. A lot of the people that are proponents of consolidation say, well, there's a tax credit out there. There is, but it has to get appropriated, as you mentioned. They already lost 20% this year. We're almost we're recognizing all the facts. Every budget forecast shows us 14 to 15 billion in debt right now, 22 the next year after, and 60 the year after. That's 60 billion. I cannot guarantee that's going to be there. People also throw out, there's grants for this, there's grants for that. Hell, we've secured $246 million in grants for our clients. I know there's grants, but right now there's no grants available for this. So even though it's in the budget, the Department of State is not giving any grants to offset the costs you mentioned before. The tax credits have already been cut. Our plan, and Kathy will go through it, and going to show you what the impact is without any tax credit, and then what it would be if you get a tax credit. But you have to look at it with your one eye open or both eyes open in this case, and see that it's not guaranteed. I wish it was, but it's not guaranteed.
So going back to what are the impacts? The first impact is, what is the potential cost savings and potential cost increases that can occur if the village and town considered consolidation? I'd like to talk a little bit about why this really strong division of labor that exists. When you look at it, right now, the town already delivers parks and recreation, ambulance, assessment, dog control, and transfer station services. They're delivering it. There is no duplication being done by the village. And those are services that are shared by all village and town residents. So that there and of itself doesn't lend itself to significant opportunity for cost savings. The other areas that the village is delivering, sewer and water, that are also shared with the village. The town is not delivering those services. The village currently is. So you don't have an ability to bring two staffing or organizations together to try to reduce costs. It already functions like that as it is right now. And the village does have the unique services, the police, sidewalks, streetlights. That is not really a duplication with anything that the town does. So the place where there are services that both entities do doesn't necessarily mean that there's a dollar for dollar duplication, but central services, planning, zoning, and building inspection services. And as Ben talked about earlier, when you consolidate the planning and zoning, it had an unanticipated impact, and that is when you have small communities working on projects and you have these very dedicated boards that can manage much of this work. When you consolidate it and you double that work, that is not feasible long-term for volunteer boards that are already at the brink point of being able to handle any more work. And I think this year, with all the excellent activities going on in your community, that really has come out as the more and more projects that both the town and the village have on their plate right now, to envision one board handling both of those was really, everyone struggled to see how that would happen. So we saw that as something that goes in the cost column for consolidation. And I just want to reiterate, these savings estimates do not take into account the one-time costs for plan development and implementation. So and as Ben said, there's about $52,000 of potential savings, and I'm going to walk you through that. Your combined levies of the town and village is about 5.3 million. So this represents 1% of your combined levy. So in the savings area, you're going to end up with one chief elected official and one board. We used the costs from the smaller of the two communities as the estimate for some potential cost savings. So it could be either board. However, this was the savings, and that included personnel costs and other ancillary items. In the central administration and fiscal and legal services, we found a potential of $95,000. The first and most obvious thing we found was you have two very strong administrative systems that work really, really efficiently, and that it didn't lend itself to huge savings. There's about 8.5 staff, what we were looking at in terms of the central administration and fiscal operations right now. And there's one or two functions that clearly are a duplication. The tax collections would be the most obvious. Right now, the village collects taxes, the town collects taxes. If you collapse, you're going to have one tax collection system. You've got other functions that folks are doing the same kinds of work. However, when you centralize or consolidate, you're not losing the dollar for dollar savings. So I'll give you some examples. Right now, both governments put together an annual budget. They have to close out their annual books. They're reconciling all their bank accounts. They're purchasing. They're doing management of procurement. They're doing accounts payable and accounts receivable. You consolidate those. Yes, you're going to have some savings, but you're going to have an organization that has a lot more volume of activity in each of those activities, and it's going to be a broader and a little bit more complex. So when we kind of laid out by function what were the opportunities, and we felt that it was feasible to get potentially through consolidation, maybe save one position over time. And we did not identify a particular position because we really feel that you've got some really good, strong staff people. And I think you need to get in and look at how, if you were in a situation to consolidate, how would you optimize the skill sets and how would you reconfigure the organization that would best meet your needs going forward. So the big piece of that is then the savings from a position. You're going to save some savings relative to some professional services. I think your consolidated fiscal operations, for example, may not need some of the contracted outside accounting services. You may have some small, slim savings on legal services if you consolidate. But overall, it was little pieces of a lot of items, but nothing very, very significant. Ben, could we just go back for a quick sec? I just want to point out that, so that comes to about 172,000. But then we have the new cost of the planner that we discussed. And then if you see the fourth column, there is a wage differential that we assumed based on the current union contract, that if you were to blend the organizations, you'd experience some increases there. And similarly, on health benefits, the town and village have similar plans, but the employee contribution is higher in the village than in the town. So when you try to harmonize that, there's a little loss of revenues. So when you take it all into consideration, we came up with the 53,000. So that represents a 1% potential change. We saw property tax shifts much larger than that. And what we saw was that the village residents would experience a tax reduction, and it is due primarily to the shift of the taxes. Counter to that, we see town residents outside the village would shoulder an increase in taxes due to the shift. And the town residents outside the village would only see a savings if they receive a citizens empowerment tax credit, if it is appropriated annually. And has been pointed out, that issue right now is of concern. So why is there a tax shift? So right now you've got, think of it as 3 buckets. You've got your village, all your village levy right now is paid by the village tax base. When we move to a consolidated government, potentially you're going to leave certain costs that would be specific to services to serve village residents only will remain on that village tax base. Other services, primarily highway, planning, zoning, building inspector, et cetera, are going to go into the town-wide tax base. So, and then town outside village costs for highway, planning, zoning, building inspector, and other related costs, same as the village, will go into the larger town-wide tax base. So those two pieces are where the major shift is occurring. And your town-wide costs, which are for the services that are currently provided for everyone, including village and town outside village residents, basically remains the same. There really is no change, but for the cost savings that we are experiencing and have put into the calculation. So let's talk through the 3 tax bases and what happens right now. So let's start with the village. The village has a taxable assessed value of $83.7 million. The town outside village is approximately $446.8 million. Combined, they're up $530 million. So you can see the village is only about 15.8% of the total town-wide, I'm going to call it tax base, the full pie. Their slice is 50, the village slice is 15.8. So this chart is, I apologize for it being a little detailed, but I think it may help to illustrate what's happening. So the left side of the chart is talking about the current state. What are the current levies and who pays for them? The right side of the table says what will happen post-consolidation. So let's just take the village. If the top left of the white area. We're going to leave $458,000. That is for your services that are, we're looking to say, we want to leave them in, we want to continue services specific for the village. That would be your police, your sidewalks, your streetlights as examples. So when you follow that across, that would, in the post-consolidation model, that will remain as a 100% village cost. The balance of the village levy is $786,000. So what happens to that? That's going to get thrown into that town-wide $553 million tax base. So what is that doing? 15.8% of that tax base is the village, and 84.2% is the town outside the village. So there's your first shift that you can see happening. Now we go down to townwide. Townwide right now is 2.9 million. It's already split 15.8 and 84.2 because it's townwide and it's spread over that large $553 million tax base. You go over to post-consolidation, that does not change. That remains the same. Now we take town outside village, which again was the highway, planning, zoning, building inspection services, et cetera, that are done provided specifically for residents outside the village. Right now, town outside village residents pay for 100% of that. What happens when we eliminate the town outside village and it becomes part of the large town-wide? We have a shift. It shifts 15.8% of that to the village, and 84.2% of it remains with the residents outside the village. So you can see the shift from the village to the town-wide has a much larger implication than the shift of the town outside village to the town-wide. So when you roll it down, it changes the village payment by 28.6 by a reduction and an increase of 13.6 for the town outside village residents. Then we apply the cost savings, which gets shifted, which gets split based on that same share of the full piece of pie. And you come down to the rates, the reduction potential of the village of 29.1 and the town outside village of 12.4. In the report, we've also presented this in a different way using calculations based on the tax rates. For some folks, they may want to look at that. So when you take what we just did and you look at the village resident currently pays its current village rate was 14.88, and it pays a town-wide rate of 5.99, which is per $1,000 of taxable assessed value. In the new model, the village resident will pay the base, which is the town A fund, which is the general fund revenues, plus the D fund, which is the highway. So those two numbers up top, you see them, it's the $6 and the $3.04. That's $9.04. Those are the same costs that everyone townwide will see. And when we get down to the town, you'll see that those numbers are exactly the same. What then would be added onto it would be the sidewalk district, the streetlight districts, the police districts, et cetera, which brings it to 14.52. So the village would go from the $20.47 to $14.52 in their tax rates pre-consolidation to post-consolidation. It is important to point out, as Ben noted earlier, that village residents should also take into consideration that their refuse fee will also go up. So what we did, if you go to the far right, the town assessor was kind enough to give us what's the average village single family home taxable assessed value. So we're using a home with a taxable assessed value of $108,000. Currently, a resident would pay approximately $2,213 per year. Post-consolidation, with these new rates and the assumptions with the shifts, they would pay $1,569. However, they would also be paying the additional $135 for their refuse fee. So there's approximately a $500 positive impact, where the cost would go down about a little over $500 a year for the village resident with a taxable assessed value of $108,000. If we take the town, just quickly, you can see that the town general fund and highway fund, for a total of $9.04, is exactly the same as that for the village. They just do not have the additional specialty services as the village does. We took a taxable assessed value home of $150,000, and a current property owner pays about $1,213 per year. Post-consolidation, that would go up to $1,364, or an increase of about $151 per year. So that gives you the base before any consideration of the incentive tax credit. So look at the tax credit. The 30% of the CETC, if it's appropriated, is allowed to be used to offset the costs, the transition costs, and other costs, or any other kind of costs that the new consolidated government would like. 70% of the tax credit must be used for tax reduction. So it needs to be applied to your annual operating budgets to reduce the cost of government. And 100% of that tax credit right now, based on your current levies, is about $796,000 a year. And at 70%, it's $557,000 per year. So this chart looks at the impact from the rate perspective of what does the CETC do. So your first column is your $20.47 is what folks currently pay. And as the chart we just looked at, that would drop to 14.52. That's assuming no application of CETC. If you applied the minimum CETC, that would drop to $13.47. So 70% of the CETC is worth about $1.05 per every $1,000 of taxable assessed value. So that dropped $1.05. If it was determined that folks wanted to apply 100% of the CETC, that's worth about $1.50 per thousand of taxable assessed value. So that would drop it a little bit more. So in summary, no CETC, it's a decrease for the village, 29.1. If there is an application of 70% of the CETC, that reduction would go to 34.2. That's a reduction. And if 100% of the CETC were applied, it would be a reduction of 36.4. And again, this chart does not include the refuse. Let's walk through the impact from a rate perspective on the town outside the village resident. Current rate right now is $8.04. Based on the tax shifting and the small cost potential savings, the town taxpayer would be paying $9.04 per $1,000 of taxable assessed value. If there is an assumption that 70% of the CETC is applied, that takes about $1.05 off, and that drops to $7.99. Should 100% of the CETC be applied, it takes $1.50 off per $1,000. So it would go from $8.04 to $7.54. So with no CETC, because of the shifts, the potential impact on town outside village taxpayers is an increase of approximately 12.4% based on the model that we've presented. You'd have to assume a 70% application in this model of the CETC in order to see any savings. And as you can see, it's minus 0.7%, which is less than 1%. If there was an application of 100%, the town residents could see a reduction of 6.3%. So I'm not going to repeat this. This is just put into the presentation that if it's easier for folks to see it in a narrated version, we've just reiterated the prior chart in a different form, which talks to what happens under the three scenarios. No application of CETC. You assume that you apply 70% to tax reduction, or you assume you apply 100%. So this is just a repeat of the prior chart in a different format. And just one last note, we wanted to just show folks exactly what happens with the refuse pickup. So we use it's that same home at $108,000 taxable assessed value. And so you can see with no CETC, a village resident would be paying currently $2,213, and they would be paying a refuse fee of $219. So they'd be paying $2,432 currently. With no CTC application, they're going to have a drop in their property tax to $1,569. But as you can see, they're going to have the increase in the refuse fee to $355. So it mitigates some of the increase, some of the reduction in property tax because of the increase in the refuse fee. And then you can see what happens at 70% CET and 100% CET.
So to review, Kathy, great job. I know we've been on for about an hour and 25 minutes already. I want to thank everyone that stayed on so far in both the town board and the village board, everyone online right now. We have about 67. We go between 60 and 85 Facebook Live folks chiming in and taking a look. So regardless of the form of the post-consolidated government, regardless of whether it's a town, the consolidated government is formed as a township or as a coterminous, it's important to note that the understanding of the impact. We mentioned this already, but the form of local government representation shifts. It changes. The village residents of today will no longer have a direct representation of their issues alone. The town will still be electing and still be working together with this new consolidated government. We talk about the provision of services, and we spoke about the cost and tax implications. So on our website, labergegroup.com/Pawling, or on the town's website at townofpawling.com, in the villages, there are links to the report. The report is 94 pages. We did provide a breakout for the executive summary. That's 18 pages. And we did even further break that down to a brochure, which is a two-sided 11 by 17 that'll be mailed out. We figured that everybody has different attention spans. They may want different levels of information, but it's out there for everyone. And because we changed the format in the last minute due to COVID, we want to make sure people have the opportunity to ask questions and provide input. So I'd ask the village and town board if they want to send me some questions, or I'll respond to you guys shortly. But there are some questions that came in already. And there was a member of the public that asked about village identity and can I put up village signs, welcome to the village of Pawling in the new consolidated government? Well, that depends on whether or not you're coterminous or if you're merging into the town based upon the governance. She pointed out that in village dissolutions, there are still signs. Well, if the village dissolved, in this case, consolidated into the town, there wouldn't be a village. And it's hard for people to understand that the village boundary is synonymous with a government structure in New York State. This is different than other states. You know, if you're a commonwealth like Virginia, you have a county and you have the incorporated cities, and everything else is unincorporated and run countywide. In New York State, we have a county government, a town, and a village. If the village government is consolidated or dissolved, either which way, in this case, consolidated, you don't have a village government, you have a hamlet. So be welcome to the hamlet. The identity, the taste, the feel, what makes the village special is still there. That's to answer Helen's question. So no, yes and no. If you're a coterminous village town, be welcome to the village and town of Pawling. If it's a consolidated town, it's welcome to the hamlet of Pawling. But it doesn't change the love and the feel of the community. There was another question, and I'll get to the Facebook questions in a moment. There was another question that she had regarding, and I can't find my notes, so I'll get back to them. But I think we handled it. She asked about how we came up with the cost savings of staffing. We hit that already. Kathy went through that a few times. She asked how we came up with our transition costs, whether it was an hourly rate or our professional experience. It's our professional experience having implemented half a dozen of these and also implementing Town of Brookhaven's consolidation study. And then she asked about the CETC tax credit and whether or not I believed it was going to be there or not. Helen, if I had a crystal ball, I would be playing lotto every day. The reality is we are in a fiscal crisis in New York State that we've never seen before post the Depression. Whether or not it'll be there, I have no idea. Precedent this year is all aid to localities was reduced by 20%. Conventional wisdom would say that future grants will be dependent upon annual appropriations based upon whether or not we actually have any money at the state level. I will say, though, that the grants that some of the proponents were saying are out there, you have to take that with a grain of salt. Even if there was a grant, would you even get money? We're working with the town and village of Van Etten. The village of Van Etten dissolved 2 years ago. The town still has not received the money from the state for the implementation of that dissolution. So the town of Van Etten's already laid out almost $80,000 that they haven't gotten back from the Department of State. So for those people like to say there's a grant for that, there's a gentleman back in the 80s that wore a green suit and green pants with dollar signs all over him, who had a big book on the news and on the commercials on Long Island that said there's a grant for that. Well, he went to jail. So just saying that there's a grant for that is not enough. And so fully understanding what your outlay is. And you guys are at risk, the village and town, until you're in a better situation of state finances. So I want to hit one more thing, remind you all that the referendum vote is on November 30th, 12 to 7 and 12 to 9 respectively, and get to some more of the questions. I believe the supervisor sent me over a question or a comment from Steve Goldberg. I'll read that to you. Thank you for the presentation. I've read the entire report very carefully. It was very comprehensive. It only left me with a single question about which I am really curious. Specifically, while I see a very small financial benefit for the village taxpayers, I'm confused about the town taxpayers. With no financial benefit to the average town taxpayer, and with the town and government having to take on complex issues of the village, what tangible and meaningful benefit is there for a town person if this passes? Good question. For the town, you'll have one government to work with, not two. There are some efficiencies in that. A combined town court would have some efficiencies. You're no longer going to the wrong court on the wrong day with the wrong fine to pay. With the highway department, there's some efficiencies in shared services and winter and summer maintenance. There may be some efficiencies in planning and also in governance. But as a whole right now, there is not a lot of efficiencies left to have through a consolidated government. And your taxes are going up without a tax credit. It doesn't mean that through 3 to 5 years of implementation, there wouldn't be some new technological advances, staffing advances. You know, we have an aging population. We have an aging government. It's harder and harder to get people to work in village and town government. So having one government may be beneficial, but financially, there's not a lot of money there to be saved for town taxpayers. So Steve, there's your answer. Not a lot of money, potential efficiencies, both in codes, in planning, and in highway services. So I happen to have both my computer screen and my iPad. So I have a number of questions, and they're very good questions. I've been reading and watching, and I'm very tempted to respond on Facebook. I'm trying not to. So I'll answer some of them. From the beginning, there was a question of if Pawling is the first in the state to embark on a town-village consolidation, what types of consolidations have occurred in the past with Article 17A? Well, Article 17A includes dissolution and consolidation. So if you go back to our presentation in September, that can be found online at the town's website, village website, and Facebook, there have been about 21, 22 dissolutions underneath Article 17A. No village town consolidations. But on consolidations, there have been quite a number of consolidations under definition A, which is two merging together, and that's done in special districts. You see, in New York State, a taxing entity is a government structure. So there have been a number of water district consolidations, sewer district consolidations. On Long Island, there have been soil consolidations, and down in town of Brookhaven, you had some erosion district consolidations, but it hasn't been a village town consolidation yet. There have been the three other reports that began the process. The village and town of Dansville looked at different options that included consolidation, never went to vote. New Paltz never went to vote. Casanova had a report written, never went to vote. You are the first actually voting. So you are the groundbreakers in this process. Another question, going back to the beginning, there's been a lot of conversation online, so thank you. What's the difference between consolidation and dissolution? Well, in a dissolution, only the village votes. In a dissolution, town has no say in that vote. A town resident has no say in that vote. In a dissolution, only the village appointed committee would create a dissolution plan. In a consolidation, a village and town work together on that plan. So that's really the difference. That is the difference. And in dissolution, again, I go back to it, only the village votes. So if the village decides to dissolve, they can basically drop the mic, leave the keys, turn off the lights, and leave the town with all the problems. That's a dissolution. For some reason, you have to keep scrolling back to these at the beginning. We went over the known and unknown factors already. So there was a member of the viewing audience. Now I sound like doing a game show host. The viewing audience that asked about the difference in Mount Kisco and Harrison having a consolidated village structure. So we're not the first. How do these communities set their governments? Well, you're the first under Article 17A. And not to be confusing, but Article 17 sets forth the process to be coterminous. So if you want to go, if a community wanted to go coterminous, they pass a referendum, and the voters on the area outside of the village would have to approve annexation into the village and expanding the village boundaries to match the town. And then a second question on the referendum is, what do you want to be primarily running as, a village or a town? So there currently are 6 coterminous village towns in New York State. The most recent was the town of Palm Tree, was created 2 years ago, and the village of Curious Joel expanded its boundaries to match. But that was not done under Article 17A. What other questions that are here? Christine says, I believe the presentation answers the questions. There are a lot of comments for the clerks. Again, congratulations and nice job to everyone that's worked on this process and this project. All the village and town departments, village clerk, town clerk, and both boards. Some thanks to everybody. Question on the lawsuit that was filed. The lawsuit that was filed has to do with the nomenclature of the ballot and voting issues. That's being currently adjudicated in court. Those questions should go to village and town council. Somebody mentioned about having funding. We mentioned those already. Discussions about autonomy. You don't see a salary. Somebody mentioned that they see the town planner salary included in the analysis, but not a salary of a town administrator. We believe that once you consolidate all the staffing in the central administration, you can reorganize the current staffing to have the salary covered for a town or a village administrator. We don't think you have to include an absolute new salary and budget structure. There is more discussion online about consolidation and voter rights, and about planning and zoning and village autonomy. I don't have to read them all. They're available for people to review. A question, do village residents vote count as two? Well, that's a question. That's a good question. I do not have a legal answer because I'm not an attorney. That'll be adjudicated. Department of State provided their informal opinion that says, based upon the U.S. Constitution, is one person, one vote. If a village resident votes twice, the village residents have undue influence on a town election. That's adjudicated. That's going to go to. That's part of the process. We'll let town council, village council deal with that in court. Other people are just saying vote yes, vote no. Those aren't questions. The cost for Laberge Group through today is a part of village notes and village minutes. We have a contract for services that was approved by the village and town to provide this. That is not reimbursable unless there's a grant to go backwards. Department of State does go back to April 1st. So if they do allow for a grant to come out in December, January, February, or March, legal fees and our fees may potentially be covered in part by those grants. Someone asked me to answer the questions from Facebook. Thank you, Karen. I think I'm doing that right now. Still going through. Any tax savings we might get will be eaten up by higher garbage collection fees, unfortunately. We're estimating that, but again, the consolidation plan would have to agree on that. Somebody keeps being sarcastic about houses being painted purple. For the record, I am not a political lobbyist. I'm not registered as a lobbyist. I'm a professional consultant. So those that try to take my credentials and use it in vain, go at it. Have fun. All righty. So that's all the questions. There's some snarky comments, but great. I'll be happy to meet anybody with any comments or questions. Snarkism is not required or necessary, but again, if that's what you like to do, have fun at it. With that, I'll turn it over to the Village and Town Board. If you have any questions for Kathy or John or myself, I'll be happy to answer them.
Ben, I think you did a fabulous job tonight, and I applaud you and the Laberge for this hard work that you've done getting this prepared, and I hope they all vote no.
Thank you, Dan. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I would say that also, that I hope everybody votes no.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's a great presentation you did tonight. It was really easy to follow. And I'm just hoping that people will understand what they're going to give up if they split the village.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question from that came up also. Is there a way to protect current village services from being eliminated in the future? Well, if the vote was in the affirmative to consolidate, and should you have to then develop a consolidation plan, the village representatives and the town representatives together will craft a consolidation plan which will protect the village services. The challenge we have in this is an important distinction to have, is that you cannot encumber a future successive board. So even though you have this plan, there's no way of requiring a future government to follow that plan. So the only way to protect the village services being eliminated is to vote no. If you vote yes, you're putting your faith in the village and town and the successor consolidated government to protect those services. Now, the water and sewer, they have to go forward. You have a district already. The police, that's at risk. Garbage, that's at risk. Lighting and sidewalks, somebody's got to pay for it, whether the consolidated government pays for it out of general revenue or whether it goes back as a district, that has to be provided. The lights aren't going to be turned off. Now, again, we've done this in numerous communities as far as dissolution, not consolidation, and the lights are still on. Sidewalks are still maintained. Water and sewer services are still provided. But it's a leap of faith. The people that started this process asked all the entire electorate to join them in a leap of faith. You, as the boards, have asked us to prepare as in-depth a report as possible, even as we receive pot shots from some of the proponents. We do this in a way that's informative, objective, and unbiased. And I believe that the report gives you that information as to how to protect everything. Any other questions anybody else on the boards have?
Ben, I'd just like to make one comment. You said that, the water and sewer districts are already established and would remain the same, but in fact, they will have to be reestablished under the new government if there's consolidation. So there are potential for any, for lawsuits and all sorts of things in that process.
Yes and no. So it's an interesting conundrum. OSC has ruled through their opinions that a vote on dissolution, so vis-a-vis a vote on consolidation, is to continue the water and sewer district in the way that it's been administered and the size it is today. So yes, you have to create a new map plan report and go through the process of reforming the district, but you do not need to have a new vote on that water and sewer district. Because the fear was that under this law, that if you have to recreate water and sewer, that there may potentially be an opportunity for the voters to vote against district formation, and then you're left with infrastructure and no money, no water, and no sewer. So OSC opined and has an opinion that in this process under Article 17A, the vote itself, if it's in the affirmative, is to keep the water and sewer district. However, if you need to expand that water and sewer district, that has to go back out to vote for full and new district formation.
Ben,
Yes.
just wanted to bring up as far as the village services and working out to keep the village services, it's been in the plan pretty much that would be dealt with by forming districts.
Correct.
Which would come at a cost.
It does. And if you remember, if you review back at the PowerPoint slide that Kathy showed you what those village districts would cost based upon the current cost of services today.
Right. So we can maintain, if we were to consolidate, we could maintain the services, but at a cost.
Correct. So you have your water and sewer is fine. Unless you expand it, then you have to go through a different process of district formation. Lighting and sidewalks, we put it in the plan as a special district, but there's nothing saying it has to be a special district. It could be a town-wide cost. There are some towns we've worked in through implementation that said, hey, the lights everyone uses, it's my central business district for sidewalks. It'll be part of my 30% tax credit until they don't get a tax credit anymore. So it's up to you in the consolidation planning process how to do that. The bigger issue, Lori, the bigger issue is your police.
The police, but also garbage. The service that we have for the garbage and recycling to be picked up, as well as the leaves to be picked up. Those are services that the village really is happy to have that service. And if you have to go out to a private hauler, that cost is going to go up tremendously just for the garbage and recyclables, and it won't do anything about the leaf pickup. Or you have to get the town transfer permit, but then that means that you have to take the garbage to the town transfer center. It's not curbside pickup.
Correct. So our analysis showed that the leaf pickup would still be done by the consolidated government, but garbage or refuse would have to go through the district to be contracted out. We estimated, we took the 2 different gallons that they gave you. I think it was 65 and a 90 gallon bin, and they gave us the prices. We cut it in the middle for an average, and it came out to be $135 more per year. Then if you look at the slide that Kathy had, it showed you the tax reduction via the shift from the village resident to the tax resident, and then they added in the actual fee for garbage to show what the average home in the village would pay on the difference in it. But again, it's not a reduction, it's a shift. You're basically saying, I'm going to pay less, but Tom, John, Rick, Harry, you're going to pay more because we want you to. So that's kind of the process here.
Thank you, Ben.
Any other questions that anybody has on the board? Or boards? Council, Nancy or Dave, do you have any comments you want to share?
All right, Ben, I wanted to just make a comment regarding school taxes. That's one thing that is not going to get shifted as a result of any kind of consolidation.
No, not at all.
So that's the biggest part of our tax bill, and really it'll have no impact as to this whole consolidation issue.
Absolutely. Now, school districts are separate entities. They have the opportunity to share, consolidate as well. But that's not part of this study. This is solely the
Right.
town and village. So the
I just want people,
majority of your tax will not change.
I just wanted people to recognize that's the largest part of the tax bill too, which will not change.
Correct.
All right, thank you, Ben. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Nothing on my end, Ben. Thank you, Dave Daniels.
Thank you, Dave.
Good job.
John Rodat is our resident budget guy. John, do you have anything you want to add, or did we cover everything?
You covered everything like a blanket that we will use in February.
It was 22 degrees here today with a real feel of -3. I think the blanket. Well, with that, I'll turn it back over to the town and village who are going to close the public information meeting.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good job.
Thank you all. Have a good night and stay safe. If I don't talk to you all, have a safe Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good night.